Welcome back to today's Explainer. Man, August 7, 2026 is turning out to be an incredibly dense, chaotic day in global events. We're talking massive geopolitical realignments happening at the exact same time as some really urgent overlapping global emergencies. Our goal today is to cut through the noise. We're going to break down these shifting alliances and complex crises so you can walk away with a crystal clear, focused understanding of exactly where the world stands right now.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with diplomacy and global security, dive into Middle East and Africa conflicts, look closely at U.S. politics and policy, and finally, wrap up with health, cyber, and global crises.
Let's get right into it. Section 1. Diplomacy and Global Security. Okay, we're seeing an earth-shaking realignment in global security today. Representatives from Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey just officially inked the Mecca Joint Defense Pact. And the absolute centerpiece of this agreement? A strict mutual defense clause. It literally means that an attack on any one of these member nations will be treated as an attack on all three. That is a formidable new tripartite alliance, right? It instantly flips the strategic calculus in the Middle East and really across the globe, forcing every other major power to seriously reevaluate their geopolitical footing.
Now, while these new alliances are rapidly forming, the old ones are actively being stress-tested. Over in Eastern Europe, newly declassified U.S. intelligence is pointing to a highly specific emerging threat. The warnings suggest that Russian leadership might actually be considering a limited-scale assault, or perhaps a targeted cyber offensive, aimed directly at a NATO member state. The fascinating thing here is the motivation. The goal isn't necessarily immediate territorial conquest. Instead, it's an intentional stress test, designed purely to gauge NATO's cohesion and attempt to permanently fracture Western support. And in a direct legislative response to exactly those kinds of geopolitical pressures, take a look at this number, 86. That represents the overwhelming 86-11 bipartisan vote we saw in the U.S. Senate today, approving a massive, comprehensive new Russian sanctions package. With a decisive margin like that, this legislation speeds straight to the House of Representatives. It's a pretty clear signal of a highly unified legislative front in Washington when it comes to international security and deterrence.
Shifting gears to the Americas for a second, the diplomatic ice is finally thawing. Mexico and Peru have officially restored their bilateral ties. This major diplomatic reset was actually unlocked by a very specific, carefully negotiated breakthrough regarding the former Peruvian Prime Minister, Betsy Chavez. The two nations reached an arrangement that officially permits Mexico to grant her asylum. It ends a huge standoff and reopens the door for some much-needed economic and political cooperation between these two regional powers.
Moving right along to Section 2, Middle East and Africa conflicts.
Across the region, we're tracking multiple overlapping flashpoints that severely escalated today. Let's break this down. In Yemen, Iran-aligned Houthi rebels launched coordinated missile and drone strikes against military camps in Marib and Hadramaut, tragically leaving over 30 government soldiers dead. At the exact same time, we're seeing a major international peacekeeping shift. Uganda's parliament just formally approved a military deployment to Gaza. This operates under the new stabilization force proposed by the U.S. Board of Peace Framework. Meanwhile, the fighting in Sudan remains incredibly intense. Government forces actually managed to repel a surprise drone strike by the Rapid Support Forces in South Kordofan. But on a darker note, separate artillery exchanges over in North Kordofan ended up leaving 5 civilians dead.
Now, zeroing in on one of the world's absolute most critical maritime choke points, there's an urgent push for stability. Iran and Oman are getting really close to finalizing a framework to establish designated commercial transit lanes directly through the Strait of Hormuz. When you think about how heavily the entire global economy relies on this specific waterway for energy transport, you realize this is a massive diplomatic effort to secure shipping amidst all this ongoing regional hostility.
And to really understand the sheer urgency of those negotiations, just look at this stark figure, 15. That is the number of commercial vessels that ADNOX reports have actually suffered missile or drone strikes in the Strait of Hormuz since hostilities flared up earlier this year. I mean, that number perfectly visualizes the extreme physical and economic risk present right now, which is exactly why they are desperately trying to lock down those secure transit lanes.
All right, bringing it closer to home. Section 3, U.S. Politics and Policy.
Up on Capitol Hill today, the procedure surrounding Dr. Anthony Fauci took a highly unique political path.
First off, the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee voted strictly along party lines to hold Dr. Fauci in contempt of Congress. But the second step is where the maneuvering gets really interesting. Committee Chairman Rand Paul officially decided to bypass a full Senate floor vote entirely. Because of that, the resolution was sent directly to the Department of Justice for review. It's a move that totally accelerates the confrontation by skipping over traditional legislative hurdles.
Over in the executive branch, the Trump administration enacted a slew of executive orders today aimed at fundamentally reshaping immigration policy. These orders specifically target restricting eligibility rules for birthright citizenship, a move that is undoubtedly going to face some immediate legal challenges. On top of that, these executive actions tighten up the screening standards for foreign visa applicants and mandate significantly increased scrutiny on trans-border visitors, which is going to completely change the day-to-day operational landscape at U.S. ports of entry.
Shifting over to domestic fiscal accountability, we got a massive audit released today from the Government Accountability Office. And get this, they revealed that over $110 billion, yeah, billion with a B, in claimed federal budget reductions actually totally lacked supporting evidence or just contained massive calculation errors. For the everyday taxpayer, that is a pretty staggering failure of oversight. It really goes to show how these massive, highly publicized government savings can just completely evaporate under scrutiny, directly hitting the true bottom line of our national deficit.
Finally, let's zoom back out for Section 4, Health, Cyber, and Global Crises.
We are currently tracking a deeply concerning, rapidly escalating public health emergency over in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The World Health Organization is warning that a severe Ebola outbreak is now spreading faster than their response teams can even track it. We're looking at over 4,000 confirmed cases and 1,800 reported deaths. And as if that wasn't tragic enough, local health staff have actually walked off the job to protest their incredibly dangerous working conditions. It's severely crippling the boots-on-the-ground medical response right when it is needed the absolute most.
We also have to report on a localized but incredibly severe tragedy today in Thailand. A devastating mass shooting unfolded near the Debsarin Nonthaburi school in the Bang Krai district. A gunman opened fire, leaving 9 people dead, which does include the shooter, and 15 others wounded in just a horrific, heartbreaking act of community violence.
Transitioning to the digital realm, federal agencies had to issue some urgent warnings today after detecting a highly sophisticated wave of cyber attacks. What we're seeing are targeted social engineering attacks aimed directly at major U.S. private equity firms and financial institutions. The primary goal of these coordinated strikes? Credential harvesting. If these hackers are successful, they could compromise the very data and capital infrastructure of the American financial sector. It is a stark reminder of just how vulnerable our modern banking systems are to organized psychological hacking. Anchoring us back into the physical world, 65,000 represents the staggering number of residents forced to abruptly evacuate their homes today in eastern Washington state. Raging wildfires are just tearing through the region, fueled by bone-dry conditions, and they've already wiped out over 850 residential and commercial structures. It's a massive blow to these local communities and remains a highly volatile, ongoing emergency situation.
So, looking at the sheer breadth of these global events today, from the new Mecca Defensive Pact to environmental disasters in Washington, cyber threats hitting our financial institutions, and all that complex diplomacy in the Middle East, we really have to ask ourselves a vital question. How resilient are our global systems? Can our infrastructure, our alliances, and our institutions truly adapt fast enough to handle this intense level of overlapping, simultaneous pressure? It's a massive amount of information to process, I know, but understanding how all these threads connect is exactly how we stay informed and prepared. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.